Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Boy, I got a story for you today.
Okay. Well, I should let everybody who's listening know that when you start with that, like, I don't know where we're going.
I know. Get ready.
I'm
Buckle up,
listening
babe.
for the first time like them.
I'm about to
'Cause
drop a bomb.
You don't like pre-give me the story. This is what he says. He's like, okay, I'm going to start. And then there's no like, this is where we're going.
Brace for it.
Okay.
Okay. So this is about one of my clients. I was on a phone call with him today. Yeah. And he's just a stand-up guy, one of my favorite people. And he's like telling me about an exchange between him and his son. And his son is a couple of years old. Now, this guy is just, a stand-up guy and a stand-up dad. So he's one of those that's always affirming his kids, and they all feel loved by him and stuff. But so with his kid, I don't know if his kid's around 2 years old. He's like old enough to talk, but young enough to still have diapers and whatnot. And so that comes into play because one of the things that he's always affirming his kid on is his penis. So he's always like, you
That's
have
not
a
where
big
it sounded
penis. You got such a big penis. He's like, yeah, Dad, you got a big penis. And so his kid's like, he's like, any way I can build this kid's confidence,
That's
you know?
hysterical.
Because really, he's one of those guys who knows that masculinity isn't about
It's
our
more
penis.
than just penises.
But he always is like, you got a big penis.
Yeah,
and so the kid's like,
totally.
yeah, I do. And so anyways,
That's cute.
his kid, I don't know, his mother-in-law or something is watching the kid. So the kid's with grandma, and he's running around his diaper and drops a deuce in his diaper apparently. And so grandma goes to change him, right? And while she's changing him, he goes, "Grandma, I have a big penis, don't I?" And she was like, did not know what to do
Bright
with that.
red,
Oh
like,
yeah.
Oh,
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yes. You're not going to burst that kid's bubble.
No, not at all.
No.
I mean, and I get it. Like,
You're just going to say,
for years, I've run around with a trench coat and just run up to people in public and been like, I'm
Is
big.
this big?
Yeah, how am I? How does it look, you know?
that's not true.
That's not true at
That's
all.
predatorial. That's not something we promote or stand by in the Connected Life podcast. Things to not actually do.
That reminds me of the episode of The Office and the Flasher. Oh. Everyone out there that watches that will know what I'm talking about.
That reminds me of a youth pastor I grew up with who actually got caught flashing a policewoman. So we have different memories.
Horrible. That is just horrible. Why would you do that? Anyways, I don't even think that's what we're talking about today. I cannot
is
tie that
not-
in to what we're talking about today.
No, you can't.
So you're running around in a trench coat.
Do not run around in a trench
Surprise!
coat. No. Okay. That's funny though. I do want to just say really quick something I'm really excited about. We just this week launched our Living Fully Alive course. People can
Early
register
enrollment,
now.
getting enrollment going on.
We're having
Yep.
so many people sign up. We're excited
Super
about
cool.
that. But I wanted to read really quick something that someone wrote about it. Y'all, I don't even know who this new woman is. I remember when I first started noticing I was different. I wondered if it was really real. I thought there was no way transformation could happen that fast. I don't even know who this girl is, but I love her. I'm no longer frustrated and telling people to just get their crap together. I understand victim mentality, compassion, and how to get my power back. Codependency blew my socks off. I am freaking free. Obviously, we will always be in process, but right now I'm experiencing freedom like never before. I don't know how, but this class accelerated an area of growth that I've been wanting for years. Have you ever had a season where you feel so in step with God? That's what this class was for me.
Wow. That girl is on fire.
That was a really good one, huh?
That was a good one.
Yeah.
I like that.
One more.
I like that
I
testimonial.
can't tell you how life-changing LFA has been for me. I've been on an emotional health journey for years and have been consuming books and courses endlessly. It wasn't until these last 12 weeks where I feel like the content and tools that you gave us really actually brought what I needed, wanted, and desired together. It's incredible how it all fit together. It was enough background teaching tools that I felt equipped and empowered to just live my current life so much better. I've used these tools with myself, my teenage children, my mom who's fighting Parkinson's, etc. Learning how to love people well in my day-to-day world has been so awesome. And of course, loving myself well, finally, for the first time ever.
That's so great. I really love that. And so Living Fully Alive 2020 starts January 6th.
It's a 4-month course.
Yeah, 14 weeks. We got involved there. And you can go to stumblconsulting.com to go ahead and sign up.
There's a video on there to hear all about it.
More info on everything.
It has the names of tons of the sessions. Like it's gonna get you excited.
So today we're going to talk about the 7 steps to walking through breakups and betrayals.
To overcoming breakups and betrayals.
Overcoming! You're about to overcome your breakups and betrayals.
Now, we've had so many people write in questions about this actual subject. That's why we decided to do it. So we do actually take your requests in mind. And I was trying to figure out if we should do breakups with betrayals, but basically the same steps need to happen.
Really a lot.
They apply for both. So it really doesn't matter if you like have recently gone through a breakup, a marriage, a friendship, a family breakup, or if it's just been a betrayal.
Yeah.
This is going to be the episode for you.
Yeah. And as humans, we all experience betrayals at some level.
Everybody.
Right. It happens and it's sad and we got to learn how to work through them because you're not going to live a life without having at least one betrayal in your entire life.
Absolutely. And there's varying levels.
Right.
This is what Justin says is he's like, lots of people, we all experience and we betray people, but all on different levels.
Sure.
Yeah. And so what I would say is like we all get hurt and the goal is to actually learn how to process through pain well. That's why we created the Living Fully Alive course. Because if you're going to walk through relationships, you're going to walk through pain. And so knowing how to go through the pain process is so important.
Right. So let's talk about different forms of betrayal really quick, because we want you to like kind of look at it and go, okay, this is kind of a form of betrayal that I'm aware of inside of my life. And so one of it, I want to talk about lying.
Yeah.
Or lying by omission.
Yeah, both count. Both count. You can straight up say something to somebody, or you can just avoid telling somebody.
Yeah, and I know that there's one story of a couple where, one of the spouses literally was in charge of taking care of paying the mortgage, and then for almost over a year, they didn't pay the mortgage, and all of a sudden, there was a foreclosure notice that showed up on the door.
Yes, and the other spouse was like,
what is going on? Oh, yeah, I didn't tell you. I haven't been paying that. I've been avoiding that.
Right, but he wasn't lying like boldface. He just was omitting a very important truth.
Yeah, which led into a deep breakdown of trust like that.
Absolutely.
That was attached to the entirety of their safety. Like, oh, this is our home. Like we lost our home because you couldn't invite me into it and you just omitted it.
Yes.
Never once did she say, have you paid the mortgage? She just assumed.
Right. Well, and so that leads into another kind of lying, which I would say is like not being honest with your feelings for years. And this has happened, but I remember this happened when I was like in middle school. I had one of my friends come to me and be like, I've been annoyed at you for a year. And I was like, for a year, you didn't tell me that you were frustrated at something like, and that felt like wildly out of control and betraying to me. Right. Because I thought we were fine. So you've been
building a case. We're great. This relationship's fine. And you build this whole case against me. And now you're just going to explode on me.
Yeah.
And that feels really betraying because you're trusting that, hey, this person says they love me. This person's saying we're good. And now I'm going to believe it. And oftentimes I found people come in, and that's one of the most like low level but devastating betrayals is not sharing honestly how we feel in a relationship for an extended period of time. We're not talking about like, oh, it took me a month to figure out how to handle this. I was in process. I just wasn't going to tell you. 2 years into the relationship,
I was too scared.
I walk away because I was too scared.
Yeah. And what it does is it creates a mountain that's unconquerable.
Yes.
So that's why it feels like a betrayal, because you're like, well, if I would have known, I had a friend who did this often. She would bottle things up and then tell me, and I'm like, well, if I would have known back then, we could have walked through it.
Instead of one offense to your soul,
right.
I now have 500 offenses, and I didn't get a chance to correct the 499 that came after the first one.
Absolutely.
And so that creates, destroys safety in the relationship.
Sharing secrets.
Big one.
Big betrayal.
And that happens often, especially inside of friend groups, where you're like, I told one and now it's to 10 people.
Totally. Gossip, slandering.
Those are big ones. Gossip, slander.
Yep.
Cheating.
Yeah.
That's one that we feel like it's one of those giant, enormous ones.
Oh, yeah. It feels so devastating. And that goes kind of hand in hand with breaking promises. And it could be breaking promises in a romantic relationship, or it could be like in a family relationship. It could be like when you have some family and everyone in the family was saving to go on a cruise together.
I want to tell this story.
Good. I was like, not sure if we could tell it, but it's funny.
My grandma and grandpa, for years promised a family that they were going to take the entire family on a cruise.
Yep.
For like their 50th or 40th. I don't remember which anniversary, but the whole family was going to go. So for a solid almost 2 decades.
Yeah, people are paying in for that.
Every one of the siblings are giving money to them so that they're going to... So all of a sudden, no joke... I mean, we're talking, this was things where people would go, oh my gosh, it's not too far away and we're all going to go on this.
Totally.
And all of a sudden, I don't know how the information gets leaked, but it's like, oh yeah, Grandma and I are going with our friends on this on this cruise together.
They went on a cruise with everybody's money and didn't invite any of the family.
No, they totally shattered the promise, and then they ran off. It was like a heist, a bank heist. Grandpa and Grandma performed on the entire family.
Yeah, so
and
that
everyone
would
felt
be
so betrayed and devastated by that.
Yes, totally. I also think non-amicable endings of relationships can feel like betrayal. So maybe you just cut somebody out.
Oh yeah, that's a big one where you just shut off and you're like, what? I don't understand what just happened.
Yeah. Or you disconnect, but you guys never actually get to talk through problems. Like maybe don't just shut it off. Like you kind of end things, but there's not a real, like they never heard you or they never actually understood you. It can feel like betrayal.
Yeah. Purposely turning people against you.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's something
like mutiny. People love to like vilify.
Yeah.
He always says villainize isn't a word. I make up words.
Yeah. But it's one thing to go, hey, I'm verbally processing on a journey to try and get healing and come back around in this relationship. And I'm not trying to actually share it with a million people, but there's another thing where you're going, oh, I want to make a villain out of this person. And I want to let people know how terrible they are and purposely go out and do that. Yeah.
Going behind your back. So let's say, what was the example you used earlier?
Of going behind your back? It'd be like if I said something like, I want to buy a brand new car. And you're like, no, I don't agree with that. Yeah. We can't do that. Are we on the same page, Justin, that we're not going to buy that? I'm like, totally. And I come home a week later and this has happened. I've had so many men and women alike, not with us, come into my office and be like, and then I showed up and she was so pissed, but I couldn't take it back. I already drove it off the lot.
That's true.
But that's a massive betrayal. It's a breaking of that trust.
Although, and what we want to say is, if you've done these things, that doesn't make you a villain. Because like Justin says, we all are making messes.
Yes, we've all made messes. We've all in some way, shape or form betrayed others in some way, shape or form. Yes. At some level in our humanity. And so it needs some forgiveness.
Absolutely. And then here's one I think is really important. Suddenly changing the rules to a relationship.
Right.
So this has happened to me before where somebody starts dating someone and all of a sudden the entire way that we've interacted for 7 years, they throw out the window. And so now the rules of the relationship are completely different on their terms.
Oh yeah.
And I had
that with a friend in my early 20s where we were like two peas in a pod. And then all of a sudden he gets this girlfriend
and he's gone
completely. I mean, like, I'm like, wait, what's going on? And he didn't go like, hey, yeah, like I think I need to transition or figure out how to connect. It just
didn't communicate anything.
Didn't communicate anything.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, we were 20. Nobody knew how to communicate anything, but yes.
I want to make a note on something before I lose it out of my head, just really quick. We talked about breaking promises. There's a difference between adjusting expectations and breaking promises. Because,
that's good.
Because I can make a promise to you like, oh, tonight after work, I'm going to go take care of this for you. Yeah. And then I realize I can't do it. I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be able to do that. Right. I know I committed to that. And that's an adjustment of expectations. Totally. That's not betrayal. It's not like, you told me you would and then you decided you couldn't.
Right.
And so a lot of people get caught in that. And that's a real big difficulty because they feel horrible about adjusting expectations rather than, oh, I'm not going to adjust expectations all, and I just won't do it.
Yeah. And some of these things, even I think that's a really good point because that's true. And a lot of this is if you can, if you learn to communicate more, it won't feel like betrayal to people. Totally. The more you can say, oh, I can't actually meet those expectations, or, oh, I know I promised you this. We need to talk through because I'm recognizing most people feel so much shame they disconnect from their shame, but that actually adds to the betrayal. And I've seen this time and time again. People will do a betraying thing. I've seen people do this with you, Justin, where people betrayed you and then they felt so much shame about what they did that then they just disconnected entirely.
Yep.
Because that's the safest way to do it.
Yeah. Then they went on to vilify me to deal with their shame.
Yeah.
And all kinds of stuff like that. But I do want to say...
I wanted to say something. Okay, so like, because here's a positive way. Like, sometimes when you get emotionally healthy, you do change the rules of the game for the people around you.
And that can happen with family.
Yeah. It can happen with family and friends. Like, all of a sudden you're setting boundaries and you've never set boundaries before. And that can feel really jarring to people. And it can feel like a betrayal to people. That doesn't mean it's bad.
We've literally had, when people get healthy, like family members be like, you're betraying our entire family.
Yeah.
And... why? Because I said no for the first time.
Yep, absolutely.
and they have to actually say, "Hey, I'm learning how to make adjustments, and we're going to learn how to adjust the rules of the game." And this.
And so the goal is not to avoid any of this. You can't avoid pain forever, but you can walk through the steps really, really well.
Totally.
So we're going to give you, 7 steps?
Yeah, 7 steps.
7 steps. And we do want to let you know, if you broke up amicably and everything was great, these are still great steps for you to go through. Pretty much it's how to grieve a relationship changing.
Right. And before we give the exact 7 steps, this is going to be key. So we're going to talk about dead zoning or romanticizing relationships, first and foremost, especially ones that have created deep betrayal, heavy, painful betrayal.
Yep.
Because for me, we'll talk about the dead zone. I call the dead zone, I made up the word dead zone. I don't know that it exists anywhere, but for me, I called it the dead zone. And it's when someone betrayed me enough that it was so painful that I decided to obliterate them from my mind and my history.
You're like, they never existed.
They never existed.
You're dead to me.
You know, I could have spent 2 or 3 years close to a person and they totally like massive betrayal. And then I just acted like I almost forget. It's almost like forgetting that it ever even happened.
Right. Yeah. Or the flip side is like the Michael Scott.
For those of you that watched The Office, Michael Scott was notorious for looking back at his former relationships.
And romanticizing them. So we can look back and we can either think they were the worst, or I'm going to kill them in my heart entirely, or that was the best and I'm missing out on everything. And so the goal is to try to find some kind of realistic, and it's hard because we either want them to be the worst or the best.
Yep.
And the goal is to hold both in your hands at the same time.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the 7 steps.
Before we do, I just want to say one more thing.
Okay, one more thing.
Lots of times in betrayals, both people can feel, and this has happened several times I can think of, relationships where I felt like they betrayed me and they felt like I betrayed them.
Totally.
And it's just because we're both triggered at the same time and we're both taking information through our filters of pain and abandonment. And so both of us actually do feel like the other person betrayed us. That happens because we work with couples and I work with friendships and roommates, and it's amazing how often both people can feel this at the same time.
So real. So why don't we talk about the first of the 7 steps?
Do it.
Grief.
Dun, dun, dun.
Grieving begins with, to me, an acknowledgement.
Yes.
I feel betrayed.
Yeah.
Something painful has happened here. And we really try to live in denialville, and we have to shatter this bubble of denial inside of our hearts and go, oh, this hurt.
Yeah.
That didn't
Or
go
this
well.
is ended. Like, even if it didn't end poorly, like, this is ended and that feels sad. Like, I miss my friend. Like, grief is so much. You go through the steps of grief. So you get angry and you get sad and you deny and you do all the things. But the goal is to actually get to where you can sit in your vulnerable feelings, which is sadness.
Yeah.
The goal is to actually get under all of the other things, to be like, I
under
feel
the
sad.
anger that makes you want to violently go key their car.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or egg their house.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So under that, there's a sadness, and it's like, oh, it's sad that you're not in my life anymore. It's sad because I'm used to calling you at this time. It's sad because I gave a lot of my heart to you. Mm-hmm. Oh, I feel a hole in my life. That isn't something that just magically goes away. And there has to be an acknowledgement, even like, so one, just the acknowledgement of your habits are changed. So before that, you were the person I called every time I had something interesting to say, but now we broke up. So I don't have a go-to call person.
Right.
So it's just normal to have, you're going to have sadness happen in normal life habits after a betrayal or an ending. And that's actually just normal and healthy.
Totally.
You should miss things about them. There should be pockets where there's a hole in your life, because if you love someone, they should be taking up space in your life.
And there may be a betrayal that's not big enough to break up the relationship or shatter it altogether, but it's a big enough betrayal that you have to readjust how the relationship is being experienced. And now you have to actually grieve, like, oh yeah, I can't just go share everything with this person. They have shared my secrets dozens of times now, and it's cost me a lot. And I still love them, and we're cordial, and there's things that we can still enjoy together. But I have to grieve the fact that they won't keep their mouth shut.
Right.
And now I can't give that part of my heart to them.
Yeah. So grief is so important, and most people try to run out of this. And I have had so many people that are like, I just ended a breakup. What do I do? I'm like, you can't shortcut the grief process.
Totally.
When a betrayal happens, you can't just get over it. Like, we all want to get out of the pain, but part of it is feeling it. And so I recommend people, like, cry about it. Let people comfort you about it.
Yeah.
Process it with people. Now, the one thing that I think makes the grief process really sticky is hopelessness and shame. And so that's when the grief process turns dark. That's when it becomes like the monster under the bed. Like, grief is healthy and it's good, and our brains and our hearts emotions need to actually process through grief in order to get whole. But hopelessness, when it gets involved, spins it out. Oh, see, everyone will always betray you. You'll never be able to trust somebody. You'll never feel safe in your life again. You'll never recover from this. You'll always be broken like this. You'll never find somebody that actually knows you, that actually loves you. No one follows through on their words. No one follows. That voice of hopelessness takes a level 5 pain and turns it into like a 500.
Oh, absolutely.
It multiplies it so much. And so now you think you're grieving, but actually you're just feeling hopelessness. And that's not what happened.
Yeah.
Like, there's two different kinds of feelings we have. Feelings about the actual circumstances, and then feelings from how we're processing the actual circumstances.
Yes.
And so if you process a breakup with hopelessness, it's going to be awful.
And I think that part of what you're saying, which is point number 2, which is
No. We can't go to point number 2 yet.
Why not?
Because I haven't talked about shame.
Okay, you go.
Okay. So shame is the other voice that we hear in grieving that can mess us up. And that's, see, you're so broken. No one will ever love you. See, you're a failure. See, you'll never be enough. See, people leave you because you're not worth sticking around for. See, you're so broken and flawed. You always attract people like this to you. See, there's something that is so disgusting about you that people have to leave you. It's all your fault.
That got real dark real quick. There's something so disgusting about you. Ugh.
That's what shame sounds like.
It does.
And so I know that when I've processed through betrayals, I have to keep my eyes out for, like, oh wait, no, that's just the voice of shame. That's adding pain.
Right. Is shame just coming to beat up on me for something that I didn't do?
I don't have space to hate myself, because actually it's happened before when somebody's betrayed me, and reminds me, and this is what you were leading into. It reminds me of something that's happened before in my history. And so then all of a sudden my brain's connecting all the dots and I'm like, I'm the common person, so it must be that it's my fault. And then you go into this shame, hopelessness. It's my fault, I'm broken, and it will never change.
So you start getting battered with all these voices.
Yeah.
And point number 2 is, what is this actually connecting to underneath?
Yeah.
Because you can have a genuine betrayal, like you're talking about, and grief for it, but it gets amplified.
Yes.
And that amplification, we're wanting to figure out what is the amplification that's taking this person who may actually be acting like a giant idiot. Just plain and simple. They have made some idiot choice where they went and they cheated on you and just tore your name through the mud and all kinds of stuff like that. And you have to begin to go, all right, but all my peace is being robbed right now.
Yes.
I feel so abandoned right now. Why do I feel so immensely abandoned inside of this situation?
Well, and that happened. This is a great example. You have an example of this, of somebody that betrayed you and you felt so frustrated about it. And so you had to go and check in, like, what is the deeper thing that this pain is connecting to?
Yeah. I went, you want me to share a little bit more?
Yes, I do. I love hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, there was somebody that I really loved that I'd just given so much of my heart to, fought for, loved on, as you do in good friendships in the journey of life. And there was a heavy, heavy betrayal on their part towards me. And I walked away feeling so devastated by it. And one of the things is, I was like, I love this person so much. Why can't they see that? And why would they do these things to me? And I started going, all right, where does that come from? I was like, oh, there's areas with like my dad where I tried to love him so much and be a really good son. And my love was never enough to get him to change how he handled my heart or how he responded to me or how he related to me. And so I noticed that, like, oh, there's a dad wound in this.
Yeah.
And so that was big.
And that leads us to actually point number 3, which is having compassion. So the first one is you have to grieve. The second one is what is this actually connecting to? And the third one is having self-compassion. So I have a story about this. I went through a couple years ago. I was in Colorado and found my mom passed out in a pile of trash, saved her life. She ended up, I had to take her to the hospital. It was a mess. It was this whole huge thing. And then we ended up
just like a fun, casual afternoon with your mom.
Yeah. And then we ended up cleaning out their hoarder's house, and it was exhausting and so hard. Me and Justin left that and went to meet up with some friends. And one of my friends on that trip literally never asked me, how are you? Like, they knew what happened. All my friends knew what happened. Never asked me, how are you? Didn't like come and hug me. Didn't like, there was no connection. And I was like, this is so weird. Like, you're one of my closest friends. I can't fathom that you wouldn't actually like have compassion in this crazy, intense moment for me.
Yeah. It was like the pain was like so high. Yes. That they couldn't even do that. For you, that they wouldn't do that or couldn't do that.
Yeah. And so I remember having a conversation and they literally were like, the weekend wasn't about you. That was their response, which I was like, this feels so crazy. But so that hurt me deeply. And I remember, and I was never able to like get to the other side. Those are nice when you can actually, there's lots of relationships where you can get to the other side of having conversations. That one we couldn't, like, there was never a place where she like ever thought like, oh, I bet it would be hard to have your mom almost die and find her that way and have your whole blah, blah, blah. She couldn't get there. But what happened was I felt this pain that was like heavy over and over again. And so then it's what is going on underneath. And I'm like, oh, you know what? This goes back to when I have a need, I'm not going to get it met. Like I've helped you through so many things of your messy life.
Right.
But now that I'm having a need, it's not going to get met. And so when I hear that, I don't think, oh, poor me, you're the worst. Because that's not actually true. I think oh, this is hitting a deeper button.
Right. Where historically in the past, going
So
back
like
to being a
with my
little
parents,
kid,
yeah,
I can't get my needs
I'm
met.
taking care of my mom's needs, not
Right.
she's meeting my needs. And so there's not room for me to have needs in that relationship. And I don't feel like that's going to. So what it does is, so then I get really soft and tender towards myself. And I am just like, I'm so sorry. I actually do talk to myself. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it felt like you had to always hold it together and people wouldn't love you without that. I don't feel that way now, but, I'm sorry that it feels like there's not room in that relationship for you to have a bad day. I'm sorry for the pain that you've gone through. I'm sorry that you didn't have room to have bad days when you were a kid. Like I just started actually like having compassion for the thing that was going on under the surface.
Yes. All of a sudden when we seek to understand ourselves is where love can get in. Is where once we have an understanding, that opens a door to compassion. Like, oh, I get it. That was really rough for that little kid. She really did need a mom. Oh my gosh, of course I have pain here. That's sad. And as that acknowledgement and that understanding is happening, that is compassion. And then all of a sudden you're settling and going, oh, yeah, this current situation isn't the best, but
right, it's
not
painful.
It's not a big deal in comparison to this all the way back here. And we begin to settle.
Yeah, because most of what happens is when a painful betrayal happens, it always brings up all of the places we've been rejected or abandoned or hurt in the past. And so it's an invitation to actually get kindness and healing to those pockets, not to prove them true, but for us to actually go validate those moments and acknowledge and love on those versions of us.
You know, the next one I want to talk about is actually what is my part in this? Because that's a really hard one. Like, especially if you've been betrayed. Let's say a worst case scenario situation.
Yeah.
Let's say, because it's very easy to act like we were only a victim to it or act like we were the sole source of this.
It's either over responsibility or under responsibility.
Totally. So I'll use an example like cheating, an affair.
Okay.
So someone goes out and has an affair on you.
Yeah.
And maybe you were difficult at times.
Maybe you weren't involved in your marriage at all.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, you could go, it's all my fault because I wasn't involved in that marriage. Well, yes, you played a role. I didn't show up to this marriage.
Sure.
But I cannot take responsibility for the fact that that person just decided to have an affair. As a powerful person, they could have said, hey, if you're not going to show up to this marriage, I'm going to have to actually end it.
Right.
Like, I want to participate. I want to go to counseling. Here's opportunities. But if you don't want to be here, then I'm going to have to walk away at some point. Like, that person could have used that. But instead, they just decided, oh, I'll just have an affair and just be a powerless person that's just in reaction to the situation.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can't just sit and blame yourself.
Yeah. But then there's also situations where you need to also take ownership. So I've worked around a lot of women or men, actually both, I've had lots of both, where their spouses may be abusive.
Right.
And they've built up a lot of frustration. And I'm like, so why didn't you set better boundaries?
Right.
Like, and that's not me blaming them. No, this other person should never behave that way.
Yeah, they should never be yelling and screaming at you or hitting you or any of that.
What is your part?
Right.
My part is I didn't say enough is enough. I'm moving out until this gets fixed. Or we can't do this. Or I want to see a counselor. And if you don't see a counselor with me, I'm leaving. Like, there's a part, even if the part you played was codependency or enabling
or a denial.
I
had a situation with a friend who deeply betrayed me. And that process on the other end of it, I can look at it and go, okay, as far as the role of this situation, I did nothing wrong. Yeah. I love this person. Totally. I fought for this person. I was in this person's corner. But when I asked, what is the role that I played in this? I went, for years, I lived in relationship with denial about who they were. Because there were all these signs in how they behaved. And never once did I go, all right, they're showing me who they are in all their other relationships. So why won't I believe them? Oh, yeah. And I chose not to believe that reality. And I chose to keep opening the door of my heart and going, hey, let's go deeper. Let's go closer inside of this. And that was enlightening. And I think that for me, when you talk about the shame thing, I went on the other side of that and I felt a level of shame because I was like, why didn't I understand? Why? I knew it. I chose to live in denial. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
I should have like drawn a line in the sand years prior to that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
I had the same. Are you still in shame about that?
No, but I got empowered by it.
Right.
Because when I could own it, then I could go, okay, moving forward, I will not use denial in relationships.
Yes.
If something is what it is. And, I had a need to belong.
Yeah.
And that was one of the other things as I was processing at some point with someone. I was like, oh, I needed to feel like I had someone that was close to me in these specific ways and that I belonged to that. So I was willing to ignore
past.
a million things. Even though I confronted at times, I would go, hey, there's a problem here. Hey, there's a problem here. Why don't you do this? But then and they would keep doing life as normal and I wouldn't draw the boundary.
Right.
I wouldn't say, all right, well, then we're not going to be close if you can't. I would just go, okay, fine. And I decided they'll never betray me.
Totally.
They may be a mess in everything else in their life, but they won't betray me.
And this is how you know it's denial, because I actually told you time after time after time, I'm real concerned about this person's behavior. This person's behavior feels really crazy to me.
They're a total addict. There's
a lot of huge red flags that I had, but I listened to you. But we both lived in your denial. Well, I didn't live in your denial, but I let you. I had a relationship similarly where she just cut me out, like literally ended relationship, never talked to me again. And she had done that with every single one of her best friends.
Right. The writing was on the wall.
But you know what I thought? So when I'm looking through what is my part, I'm like, okay, why did I believe that? And then I was like, oh, it's because I believe I'm the special one. I will love you in a way that will
change the entirety of the game of how you play the game of life.
Yes. And I've done that so many times where I'm like, no, but I will love, my love is bigger than their triggers and my love is bigger than their choice. If I love you enough, I'll be here with you. You won't leave.
Right. I tried to control them through my love.
Yeah, totally. Which is a mess. And so I actually find it liberating. And this is a place where so many people carry shame, and shame has to blame. We have to say it's the other person's fault. We have to. And this is, I think, the next step is we cannot villainize other people.
Them.
Vilify. I want to make up a word.
Yeah. It's the process of forgiveness and not vilifying and just beginning to go.
Wait, before we get to forgiveness, I want to say, like, part of it is when you look at relationships, you have to say, I'm attracting people that meet me in my dysfunctions.
Totally.
I'm equally as broken. Whoever I'm bringing into my life, I have that level of belief system as them. Yep. So if I keep bringing people who don't treat me well, then that means that there's probably something in me that doesn't believe I'm worthy of being treated well. If I'm not picking people that are safe, it probably means I believe I'm not going to ever be safe. And so when I look at betrayals or pain that happens in relationships, I don't want to vilify anyone. I don't want to make anyone a villain, because if I make them a villain, I become a victim. Right. And then I will repeat that cycle over and over and over again. So I could tell story after story of some wild betrayals, but in every story I could tell you what my part was. Totally. And I can take ownership. And when I take ownership, it takes some of the steam out of it. Because I'm like, no, this didn't just happen to me.
Yeah, I'm not powerless. I'm not some victim to this. They're not just some evil person. I chose this. Yeah. I chose this.
And maybe in a pretty way. Like, my dysfunctions were really pretty. So I remember when I was younger, way younger, like a teenager, I had this friend, we talked every day. And then I became friends with one of her friends, and she was like, I don't want you to be friends with this friend, because she was jealous. She thought that I would like them more than her, and she was insecure. But I was like, listen, I can't just be friends with whoever you want me to be friends with. Like, that's too much. That's controlling to me. I can't do that. But I love you. Like, I love you. I value you. I'm not threatened that our relationship won't make it, but I can't choose that. Well, she instantly cut me out. And like, that was the end. Stop talking to me. And I look back on that relationship, like, I really didn't do anything. Like, I was loving her. Right. But when I look back, I see, oh, you know what I did? I was doing the same kind of relationship with her that I did with my mom. I talked to her every day, but it was because I was helping her work through an addiction. I was helping her work through pain in her life. And so I felt really bonded to her because that's one of the ways I bond. But I don't think she knew how much I was in, how much I was hooked in,
Totally.
how important it was to me. So it was easy for her to walk away, and it was easy for her to feel insecure. I didn't realize that by not being vulnerable, I was creating a relationship that felt unsafe to her. Because I wasn't purposefully not being vulnerable. I was just trying to love her. I was like, I will love you. I'll help you walk through your stuff. But by me not having needs and being vulnerable, it made her feel less secure.
Totally.
So I don't take, again, this is what we're trying to say. Don't take over ownership. Don't take under ownership. I don't feel like it's my fault she walked away. I'm like, no, those were her abandonment buttons.
Right.
She wanted to reject me before I could reject her. However, I did contribute to the creation of that relationship.
Yeah, you did.
And so
Own it. Own it.
the more you own, the more you can change. It's actually so hopeful. You can't say, but I do just want to say this. You can't decide, well, if I become perfect, then no one will ever hurt me. You can't own, that's over owning things.
Right.
Because you don't have the power to do that. People have triggers. You could be perfect and their own pain from their past can blind them to what you're actually trying to do.
And I think that that's a big part of the whole betrayal process is, accepting that no matter how much I love someone, no matter how much I love in the world, I can't keep people from betraying me. I can't control them.
I can't.
Yeah, it's part of it. So how about this? Inside of that, to not part of not vilifying someone is the forgiveness process, and it's mixed into that, and it's beginning to go, okay, I forgive you. I forgive myself for the role that I played in this. You play, like for instance, I've had wives who have been so angry that their husbands couldn't connect in an intimate way. Yeah. Like vulnerable, intimate way. And I was like, you were scared of intimacy yourself.
Totally.
And you wanted someone.
Want it. You wanted it, didn't want it.
You wanted to find the guy that couldn't do it to try and see if you could win him over and fix your dad's wounds, but you were also scared of it yourself. That's why you chose him in the first place. Yep. And inside of it, they had to be able to go, oh, okay, I forgive you for playing the game that I chose you to play. Yeah. I chose you for this relationship because there was something inside of what you were doing unconsciously that I thought would be great. And it worked great for me until it didn't. Totally. And so I forgive you. And now I forgive myself for playing that game. Yeah. And let me write a new game that I'm going to play. Yes, absolutely. Because like we said, you don't want to ever be a victim. And so when I look back in the betrayals I've gone through, I don't feel that sting of I'm a victim to you. Right. Because I've either found what I could own. I found what I could own in all of them. And then the forgiveness piece, forgiveness doesn't mean that what you did is okay or that what you did doesn't matter. Right. It's not shoving it under the rug. People get that wrong. Like forgiveness means you actually have to say like, no, this freaking sucked. You have to be able to own that there was a debt that was owed to you. That they couldn't pay the price of in the first place. Yeah. And that's on the other side. Forgiveness, when we're talking about it at this point, we're talking about it on the other end of the grief process. Mm-hmm, and totally. So people try to subvert the grieving process.
Oh, they think if I forgive you.
Yeah, it's just going to go away. But no, I actually have to grieve, walk it out, and give myself the space, which actually goes to don't put an expiration date on your process. Yeah. And that's a big part of it because, I've gone on and off before where something came up years later. Mm-hmm. I remember there was one betrayal from a friendship that it was like 8 or 9 years later, and I'm sitting in a moment, and I all of a sudden remember this person, and I start crying about it. I'm like, why am I crying about this? This was so long ago. I remember that. I thought I was well beyond it. Mm-hmm. And I had to just give myself the grace to go, okay, apparently there was a part of my soul that didn't grieve that fully or properly. And now I'm going to let myself participate in that right now. And that's like, grief doesn't have a time limit and neither does forgiveness. So like, I know all the time I will feel like I've forgiven something. And then in a year, something new will come up and I'll be like, oh, it's another layer that I have to work on this. And we talk about forgiveness and allowing yourself to go on process in the Living Fully Alive course. You're in hysterical. Depth. But I do want to say, like, I think a lot of people shame themselves. Like, why am I not over this yet? Why is this not? But I remember like probably one of the breakups that I went through of the one that had impacted me the most.
There had been a mess between me and this guy for like 2 years. And when it finally ended, it probably took me like 5 years to process. And I wasn't obsessed about it for 5 years, but there were layers. And then actually after we got married, I still was processing some of the things, because I was having to process out some of the pain and the beliefs that I had. And part of this, and we talk about this also in the course, I'm not trying to do this. This is actually just real. We do talk about this, is the story that you tell around an event can deeply affect you.
Your narrative. The
narrative. And so I had so many intricate lies woven into this dating relationship that it took me a while to unpack them. And some people could be like, oh my gosh, are you not over your boyfriend because you're married now?
Over your former spouse?
Yeah. No, it's just a different level of grief. I want to be free, so I'm comfortable grieving. And grieving is not all consuming. And grieving for us, again, we're talking about taking ownership. So it's not going into pity.
Right.
Which is a different, because
compassion and pity are two different things. Foundationally, pity is rooted in powerlessness and victimization. Something happened to me, I can't do anything about it. Whereas compassion is like, oh no, this really happened and I can do something about resolving it.
Which goes to the first point when we were talking about grieving, how you can't listen to the voice of shame or hopelessness. Shame and hopelessness feed pity.
Totally. So let's wrap up with the last one, and we're just going to talk about follow-up. Now, follow-up is something that for some people is possible in varying degree, depending on the varying degree of the betrayal and the relationship. And are they there? Did they die? There's all kinds of things where you may not have access for follow-up. Yeah. But let's talk. Go ahead. Why don't you jump into follow-up?
Well, I would say I often think follow-up is best after a year or two.
Well, depending on what experience you're having.
Yeah. But I think most people want to do a follow-up like the next week, and they're both still really triggered, and nobody's actually had time to process and figure out. Because some of the things it's taken me to figure out to own my part has taken me like a year or two just to get through the shame and the blame and the hopelessness and the pain and the childhood stuff. It takes me a while to weed through really deep stuff. And so oftentimes if you try to have a conversation before you're ready, you're just still triggered and they're still triggered, and then you're just throwing pies at each other.
So what would a follow-up look like?
Well,
depending on what it was.
I've done lots of follow-ups. So like with a boyfriend that really affected me, after we got married, I called him and I was like, can we just talk through some things? Because we never talked through anything.
Right.
And the point was not reconciliation. The point was just to kind of clean up some of our interactions and what had happened. And there's been many times that I've followed up with people afterwards just to take ownership. And
here was my role in that.
Yep. And so I know, like, a betrayal I went through a little while ago, I took ownership, even though it felt like they betrayed me. I took ownership for all my stuff, and they never took ownership for theirs. But I walked away feeling like my follow-up, I'm like, but I did what was good for me to do.
Right.
I can only control if I'm living my best life.
I was being I felt like I was being healthy and powerful in my own being. And that's really what this is all about, is figuring out, like, finding a place of empowerment on the other side of a breakup, on the other side of a betrayal. How do I thrive on the other side of something that felt like it seemingly happened to me? And now I don't have to feel like it happened to me. I got to happen to it. I got to engage it rather than be reactive. I became responsive.
Yeah. And there's lots of relationships I haven't been able to do follow-ups with, but there's lots that I've have, and you get years later and you guys both can see it for what it really was. Yeah. And you can grow and mature, and you're like, oh, I was doing this thing. And then the other person's like, I was doing this thing. And you can kind of just talk through it without the intensity anymore. Yeah. But lots of people want to try to rush that.
I had one person that did a follow-up with me, not because of something I did to them, but something they did to me. Yep. And it was about 2 years later. They came to me and they were like, I totally betrayed you inside of that. And this is the hurt and pain I probably caused you. And here was the fallout from my life and the destructiveness that happened for me after I did what I did to you. And it was cool because my heart was open to a follow-up. Again, it wasn't me just trying to follow up with them. Yeah. It was me on the other end of them wanting to follow up with me on it. And because my heart was postured like soft, because I had been processing grief, I had been processing through forgiveness in a journey over a 2-year journey, to the point at the towards the second year of on the other side of it, like, I literally had compassion and sympathy and empathy for that person. in their life. And that's how resolved I was. So by the time that they got to me to do the follow-up, I was cool as a cucumber.
Yep.
I was so soft and receptive. And they're like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, thank you. That means the world to me. I really appreciate that could happen.
Yeah, you could actually soak it in.
But if I wouldn't have gone through the process of betrayal, the previous process, I wouldn't have actually been able to consume or digest or ingest what they were bringing to me in that moment. I would have lost out on a beautiful moment that was necessary for my heart. I would have just been like, screw you. I don't need your apologies.
Right.
And a lot of people do that because they don't do the necessary steps in betrayal or breakups in order to receive the gift that potentially could come on the other side of it in a follow-up.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go through these steps one more time, and I'm just going to mention
Real quick.
how it varies for dating. So in grieving, you've got to be sad that things have changed and that your life isn't, your future that you had imagined isn't going to show up like you thought it would. That because it's a death to an imagination, a whole vision, and that's sad. And then you can't listen to shame and hopelessness. I'm never going to find a spouse. I'm never going to get married. There's something broken in me. So you got to watch out for those lies. What is the pain that it's actually connecting to underneath? Self-compassion for where that pain came from. What was my part? Taking an honest look at it.
The empowerment moment.
Don't take over responsibility. It's not, oh, this is all my fault. If I was a better human, my boyfriend wouldn't have broken up with me. If I was a better boyfriend, my girlfriend wouldn't have broken up for me. No, it's like, oh, well, these are the things I brought to the table that created a culture in a relationship that didn't work out. Not I'm good or bad for it. Just this is what is. And I can own me and have compassion on them. And part of forgiveness for me is remembering people who are hurting us are in a triggered state.
Right.
I don't know any time that somebody has betrayed me that they weren't triggered.
Right.
And all of us show our worst case scenarios.
Totally.
When we're triggered. We have our fight or flight. We have all of our instincts going off. We are just protecting ourselves, so we're not making good decisions.
Right.
So part of forgiveness is actually having that compassion and doing that, which I think is important. And then don't put an expiration date. Give yourself permission to grieve and go on the journey as you need to. And then follow up. And this is in dating, you don't want to follow up too soon because lots of people make some weird boundaries and then they end up like messing around a bunch, but not getting back together, but not like keep good boundaries on a breakup.
You mean it's like, I'm sorry. Nom, 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 nom. Kiss each other's faces off.
Yes. But then like, we're not actually dating. We didn't actually fix anything. So in dating, I would say like, keep some good boundaries and trust. Like if you get whole and they get whole, and you guys end up back together, you'll end up back together. You don't have to figure out how to make that happen. You don't it's not your job to figure out the next, don't scheme. That's control. You don't want to like try to create that in order to do that.
Totally. Well, with that all said, thanks for joining us. If you've got anything out of this, remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share.
Yeah. We're so glad that you're here with us. Oh, also, one last thing.
No,
Okay. If you have betrayed people and you're listening to this, I want you to know that there's so much compassion and it'd be so important for you to actually be like, why did I do this? Because like I said, there's always a hurt kid inside somebody who's betraying other people. And so if you've betrayed people, actually connect to why did I do that? And then take ownership. Don't blame, because again, you can be the betrayer and blame people. Don't blame them. Figure out what is what you did. And then call them. Like this is a great week to call or write an email or a letter to somebody that you've betrayed and actually just say, I'm really sorry. And you could just say like, I was emotionally immature and I didn't know how to talk about my feelings. I remember I tried with one of my ex-boyfriends. I tried to take ownership, but he refused to talk to me. But I felt like, I did what I could.
Yeah.
I was willing to do my part.
Yeah.
And so if you're out there and you've betrayed people, which I think we all have.
Totally.
On some level, maybe not the huge ones, but if that's you, then forgive yourself, take ownership, and do what's right.
All right. Goodbye now.
That was so fast. All right. Goodbye.
Goodbye now.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
And bye.